primary reason is, as a veteran, I feel I'm obligated to have something to say. Today, as you know, several of those who were killed, their bodies were returned for honor ceremonies. And in the process of their return, this administration was there to participate. But we have to ask a very hard question with the return of these bodies and the return of all those who have been killed, the 17 since the beginning of Operation Epic Fury, the why question. And I feel obligated to ask that why question again as a veteran. As you know, one of the individuals who was killed was Isabel Gonzalez. She was from Carrollton, Texas. I'm here in Austin, Texas. Um, but in Texas, there has always been a strong correlation with the United States military. Isabel was only 19 years old at the time of her death. She wasn't much younger than the children who were killed in Manab at the beginning of this horrific war. But still, no one has asked the why questions. Why are we here? And no one seems really willing or obligated to force this administration that exists to answer those hard questions. Well, I'm going to at least try to throw out some of those questions and ask why. I feel that this country has always stood for, in almost all cases, right and wrong. And when we see wrong, this country's being able to stand up and push back, and those individuals who decided that they would use not only the government, but the laws of this nation to their own best interests, rather than the interests of the people of the United States of America. As you know, also on this day, the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, along with the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, have been asking for the United States and its citizens to supply billions of dollars, an estimated 37 or more billion dollars, to continue the efforts that we now see. But yet we have to ask the larger question. With all of that, why has there not been a passage of the War Powers Act on the part of both the Republicans and the Democrats? Why has there been no one who seemed to have been able to say, this is where we stand as a country? Yes, we might supply it for the good of the world. And many times, and I know myself, Americans have put themselves in harm's way to do the best they could for the people of this country. And for the families of others who live in other lands who weren't as fortunate as us, who had to stand up to despots, who had to stand up to those who would be willing to take their lives and who have been in control of their lives. As Ronald Reagan once said, America stands as a beacon on a hill. It's democracy. It doesn't mean it's perfect, but it means that it's there for something for all of them to want to try and find a way to become, as we have become in many ways, the land of the free and the home of the brave. Those words mean something to me, even though I can tell you for a fact they aren't always 100% true. They are something, a goal that we can all live by, each and every one of us, be we Republican, Democrat, or no political party at all. And even with the divides that exist, and yes, there are divides, many of us have come together, especially with the opening of the MOU, to find out that there are wrongs here. A country and a nation like Iran, we've been in conflict with basically since 1951. We were now going to give them billions and billions of dollars, yet with no true plan or guarantees that they wouldn't create a nuclear bomb. The only one, in fact, who's ever done anything like that has been what President Obama did with the JPOA. And what happened? The Trump administration went out of its way just because it didn't fit the criteria of Donald Trump to do everything it could to deter that. Now we know for a fact that we could have had a way of totally controlling Iran, so we would never have gone through this scenario. So that 17 people from the United States of America would not have been killed on the battlefield, lost their lives and their families, but to live with it. But even worse, as I think of it as myself and again as a veteran, there's no declaration for why we're there. We simply see an administration that seems to just want to flounder back and forth with a man who, while president, is merely living as a despot. And yet, even those who are a part of his administration have no courage, no ability to put guardrails up and say no. As it was pointed out in the book Regime Change by Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan, all of the members of his inner cabinet disagreed with the need for the United States to go and join Israel in all-out battle after Operation Rising Eagle in 2025 for a second attack against Iran. But we know that that was something that President Netanyahu wanted to have done, not something that the American people wanted to have done. And that the effort by Netanyahu had been ongoing, going all the way back beyond the days of even President Obama. And yet here we stand. Here we stand with our people coming home, killed for something that has no declaration, no definition, and no clear-cut plan by those who have initiated it. But again, I harken back to the number one question that I sit with every day, the why question. Why? Why have the American people and both sides, both Republicans and Democrats, allowed this to go further? We have protests in this country after the death of George Floyd. We have protests in this country even over the last 2 years for those who said the No Kings rally. But why haven't the Democrats brought thousands and thousands of Americans forward to stand outside in front of the White House or outside of the Justice Department, or that for that matter, the Department of Defense, and demand clear-cut answers? Today, Secretary Hegseth argued and battled with many of the members of the Senate, saying that we need more money to continue on a war that's undeclared. We need to have new autonomous equipment when many of the equipment we have has been unsuccessful. He pushed back at the former Secretary of Defense and claimed that he was the reason that we didn't have updated and newer equipment. But the reality of it was the equipment that we had was in place. It was the malfeasance and mishandling, the thousands and thousands of rounds that were fired on the Iranians, often missing their targets. And yet, we still continue to go further in this. I call on those people who are senators and all of you to say, no, we won't support any more of this until you create clear objectives. And most of all, that you, as Secretary of Defense, move forward with a War Powers Act. You acquiesce to it. That you work with the Congress and the Senate to declare what exactly we will continue to do within Iran. If we fail to do these things, if we fail to push forward with that, then how can we expect that there be any change? There were 14 million, it's estimated, people that watched the burial and the funeral procession of the Ayatollah. 14 million people. That's hard to imagine. And those people, as I watched from Al Jazeera, something that we pay little attention to, it brought it out the fact that the people who were there were crying, they were screaming, they were demanding justice for the Ayatollah. We seem to forget that from the very beginning of this war, he and members of his family were killed by US and Israeli bombings. Think about that. We assassinated the man who was the leader, not just the leader of the country, not just a president, but a religious leader. In many worlds, he's no different than the Pope is in Rome. How would we feel if that happened? If that happened to the Pope in Rome? That someone, because they didn't like his politics, assassinated him. But the real issue that still prevails is that people in Iran are losing their lives behind this. Human beings. And again, I say this as a veteran, as somebody who knows warfare. This kind of madness has to stop. If it means that the man who's sitting behind the Resolute desk is the one who has to be stopped and politically removed from office, then so be it. I don't believe in massive bullyism. I don't believe in overthrows of governments. This nation was founded on democracy, so we have to do it the democratic way. We have to go in to the voting booth and vote those individuals who have betrayed us out of office. But we also have to make ourselves aware of the fact that this is a nation that we live in. And yes, we have differences and divides on both sides. But at the end of the day, we look to the man who sits behind that Resolute desk as the one who will lead us. I recently saw a meeting in which Prime Minister Carney of Canada was speaking. And I thought to myself as I watched him stand there, you have a lot of differences in Canada, not as many as we have right now. But yet, his voice, the way he talked to the people of Canada, told me that this is a man who was determined to pull all sides together and make every effort he could to see that everything that Canada needed was right. And yet I don't see that. I see a man who screams at reporters. I see a man who, in a sense, belittles others, who has no respect for the Fourth Estate. And even worse than that, I see a media that has lost its courage, who's lost its prime directive, that no matter who is the President of the United States, you can ask and you are obligated to ask the hard questions and demand answers. And when we don't get answers, we don't run. We don't duck and dodge. We continue to demand to give us the truth, to give us the answers we need. And if it doesn't come from him, then those who are in his party, we have to demand it from. And that also doesn't take Democrats off the hook either. We need to have members of the Democratic Party stand up and not sit back with this notion that they're willing to allow the nation to secede and fall apart, and then they'll somehow recover all of this in midterm elections. For those that believe that, that's a total misgiving. And here's why. The American people are no different than myself. They'll remember that you didn't do anything when you had a chance to, that you sat back and allowed for the criminality at all levels, whether it was the Justice Department or the Department of Defense. But also, America is not a warmonger. We are a nation that believes in laws and the laws of other nations. We don't bomb infrastructures. We don't destroy water desalination sites. We don't bomb schools like the one that was in Manab, where 165 children perished. And then when we do something like that, don't have the courage to stand up and say, yes, we did that. When I served, I remember when the Vincennes, a U.S. Navy frigate, accidentally shot down an Iranian Airbus, killing hundreds of people. The United States stood up and said, yes, we made a horrific mistake, and we did it. And we're sorry for it. And we'll try to make every amendment we can. And we'll try not to make sure that we never do something like that again. But when Donald Trump was asked about the bombing that killed 165 people, many of them 11 and 12-year-old children in Manab, his answer was, that he believed that the Iranians did it themselves, even when all the evidence and all the information said just the opposite of that. And why? I have to ask again the why question. Why do we let someone like this do that without holding them fully accountable? And yet no one seems to want to. Everyone would rather back away. Just let him say out of his madness what he wants to say. We've never had a president that stays up late at night and then talks about obliteration and total annihilation of a culture and a people, like the Iranian people. Why don't we push back against that? Why don't we have the courage and the guts to say, this is wrong and we won't tolerate this, be you a Republican or a Democrat? But if we don't keep asking the why questions, then those like Trump will continue to believe that they're justified in every action that they take. So now we sit at a precipice, in my opinion. There will be no regime change in Iran. And the people there have been galvanized by all that I can see. And if you are really willing to look at something like Al Jazeera and see not just what our local media portrays, or read other documentation, other newspapers, other organizations like French 24, wherever it may be, even the BBC, and see what other opinions look like. Maybe you too, like I, will see what's really going on in that country. A galvanized nation of people who hate, and I say it with pure understanding of what hate is, who hate the United States, who hate all this proxies that exist, like Saudi Arabia, like UAE, like Qatar, and like Jordan, where we lost 4 more people. Now we have to make that hard decision. We have to say no. We have to say no, we won't give you any more money or needs to build any more weaponry. Even if you talk about the autonomous needs of weapons in the future, we'll cross that bridge when we reach it. And we have to also find a way, somehow, to develop enough courage and enough guts to push back against the criminality that we see. Do we want to have a president who behaves like a war criminal? Because when you blow up bridges, when you blow up schools and hospitals, as has been done by Israel, and Netanyahu has been declared a war criminal, do we want that sort of Damocles hanging over our heads? Do we want the world to see us as that? Do we have to stand back and let a man talk about annexing a country like Greenland and making it part of the United States when no president in the history of our country, even going back to the days of Eisenhower and the Cold War, who fought against what Russia was trying to do, who lived with the threat of Russia at that time? Do we even talk about something like making Canada the 51st state and not realize that we're talking about nothing but pure madness on the part of that man, a man that we have in office, a man who's currently the president of the United States, Donald Trump. But again, we have to ask why, and we have to keep pushing. And if you want to follow what I'm doing and what I'm writing about, you can find me on Substack, Spotify, and on YouTube at the Barbarians newsletter. And read my work and subscribe. This is a call to action, and I hope you will follow along with me. I hope we can join together and push back and regain our nation again. Even if you're on the right or the left, we both are unhappy with what we see, and we both have to keep asking the hard question. But remember, the hard questions begin with one basic factor. We have to ask them, when they do what they do, why they do what they do, and make them accountable. This is Raj Christian for the Barbarians. Thanks, and I'll see you down the road.